have a rendezvous with death. We'll preserve the last best hope of man on earth, or we'll sentence them to take the last step into 1,000 years of darkness.
No fear. No political correctness. No wokeism. You're listening to Underground USA.
Thanks for downloading, listening, and sharing. You're listening to Underground USA. No fear, no political correctness, and no wokeness. Find everything we do, new podcasts and articles at undergroundusa.com. Before I get into the main topic of today's America's Third Watch segment, I have to issue, as if this podcast is a disseminator of the old civil defense alerts, I have to alert everyone to a pretty despicable move that the deep state establishment RINOs in the U.S. Senate are trying to get away with. This Wednesday, after a 3-day weekend when people won't be paying attention, Mitch McConnell, the Senate Minority Leader, has called for leadership elections. McConnell, a decrepit RINO who has proved himself a tool, no pun intended, of the inside-the-beltway establishment and blatantly outed himself as a Trump hater, is attempting to install deep staters loyal to him and the establishment Uni-Party before his authority to do so expires at the end of his reign. Slating this election prior to the newly elected senators being seated is to disenfranchise them and the voters they represent from having a voice in who leads them in the next Congress. How is it that any U.S. senator on the Republican conservative side of the aisle is allowing this communist Chinese-friendly Uni-Party reprobate to have any voice in what happens in the next Congress? Isn't it bad enough that the Republicans and conservatives in the Senate have to combat the never-Trumpers amongst them? Isn't it enough that this moldy gas bag clandestinely ruined the chances of winning for several change candidates, MAGA candidates for U.S. Senate in the 2024 general election by withholding desperately needed campaign funds? Mitch McConnell and his Igor-like minion, John Thune, who masked himself as a Tea Partier, did a great amount of damage to the first Trump administration's attempt to rein in the deep state bureaucratic establishment. At every turn, they aided the Uni-Party while quietly working against reforms the American people voted for in their election of Donald Trump. Now, as Trump 2.0 stands to assume the Oval Office, are we supposed to swallow the same self-serving, degenerate deep state establishment, good old boy network political bullshit that McConnell's been serving up his entire tenure? Hell no to that. Hell no. This is one of those times that we must contact our U.S. senators. Tuesday morning, after they return from their out-of-office weekend, we must demand that they move to postpone the leadership elections until the newly elected Republican U.S. senators are sworn in and seated to the Senate. Use the link provided below to email your demand, post your demand on social media, and call the United States Capitol switchboard at 202-224-3121 to be connected to your senator's offices. Demand that they postpone the vote until the next Congress and to stop their deep state games. We haven't come this far, defeating the Obama-Biden-Harris regime soundly, only to lose to the Uni-Party, to lose to the deep state establishment, to snatch defeat from the jaws of victory. The election isn't over until the reform and anti-establishment, anti-deep state apparatus is firmly in place and operating. And to make that happen, we must all act against McConnell's power grab right now. When we come back, our segment on America's Third Watch, broadcast nationally on our flagship station WGUL, AM 930 and FM 93.7 in Tampa, Florida.
You're listening to Underground USA.
Our federal government has been co-opted by the globalist sycophants of the deep state bureaucracy. At every turn, This bureaucracy expands its power over both the American people and the states in which they live. The framers knew corruptible men would one day bastardize their elected authorities and attempt to centralize government in Washington, D.C. That's why they gave us the 9th and 10th Amendments. That's why they left standing the tool of nullification. In his book, Nullification, The Case for Decentralizing the Federal Government, Frank Salvato lays out how states can claw back their constitutionally mandated powers from the overreach of the federal government, doing so in a manner that prevents a second bloody civil war. Get your copy of Nullification, The Case for Decentralizing the Federal Government. Available on Amazon.com in Kindle form and paperback.
News, insight, passion. AM 930, The Answer.
So here we are. It's Veterans Day. It's the day that we reach out. We say thank you to our veterans for their service. Because, Frank, our country wouldn't be here without them. That is absolutely the case. And programs like this would not exist without our vets.
'Tis true. And we owe them a debt of gratitude for their service. It comes in a very close second to Memorial Day because, the veterans are people who lost a lot of their buddies and friends. And that's why we celebrate Memorial Day. But there is the difference. Memorial Day is a day that we honor the people who gave the final measure in defense of our country. Veterans Day is the day that we look at people who came home and say thank you for standing on that wall and defending our country with your lives. So today, to all the veterans, happy Veterans Day, well deserved. I hope that with the Trump administration, we can clean up the VA and get it to something that actually serves you with fidelity, potently, and adequately.
Indeed. Yeah, and each week here on the program, we talk with Jimmy T. Smith from Concerned Veterans for America, and part of what they do, Frank, again, is to try to straighten out things that are happening at the VA, because our vets sometimes wait until, in terrible cases, they actually pass away before they actually get the care that they need. And so a lot of this policy influence here is designed to at least get our veterans to be able to go out and see any other doctor in the community in many cases. So, there's so much that we can do for our vets.
And that should be the standard. And I believe that's what Donald Trump has been talking about when he addresses VA issues, is that if you're a veteran, you served your country, you have an honorable discharge, you should be able to see your doctor and be able to have the VA be a paper chase, nothing else. You should be able to see your doctor, any doctor you want to, and your medical bills should be dealt with by the VA. It really should be that simple.
Yeah, and we owe them that. I mean, it's just, to me, it's a no-brainer on that.
Well, we have a contract. The country has a contract with people who served. They made, when they signed up, certain promises were made. It's time for the federal government to make sure that they are making good on those promises. This can dovetail into a much bigger conversation about how federal government is failing not only the veterans, but every American citizen at this point. But that would take a week of shows, if not a full year of shows. So concentrating on the veterans alone, we would like to see them taken care of once they're finished with their time. I'd also like to see the federal government and the medical complex and Big Pharma stop using the veterans as guinea pigs in the experiments that they make them go through every single year. You can make the argument that doesn't happen, but that's a load of crap. Mm-hmm. Every new vaccine, every time they go overseas, every time they get jabbed more times than a pincushion. and a lot of times it's, you will take this. There is no choice. There is no saying I can't. When they said they didn't want to take the COVID vaccine, a lot of them lost their careers. So that's got to stop too. And hopefully with the injection of Robert F. Kennedy Jr. into the Trump administration, looking over the CDC and the NIH and the FDA, maybe we can start changing that around too.
I think you're exactly right. And what a contrast, Frank, between what the Democrats try to, they go on and on about, personal choice and they're anti-authoritarian and so forth. But yet look what happens under their regimes. And it just, hopefully we have a real chance for substantive change with the Trump administration, because there will be this, lack of a better term here, diversity of opinion that hopefully can synthesize into moving forward into more common sense. Diversity in a good way, not in the way that the far left tries to pawn off on us.
Let's be honest and crystal clear about it. The only time Democrats, and especially far left Democrats, champion your complete freedom to choose is when you want to cut or kill something out of your body.
Yep.
They don't want you to have full freedom of speech. They don't want you to have freedom to bear arms. They don't want you to have freedom from the tyranny of federal government, especially the tax man. So, let's be clear about that.
Well, Frank, other than what to do with Kamala Harris, President Biden got an interesting question. He was getting into the big SUV, the presidential SUV there in Delaware. And someone said, do you still think Donald Trump is a threat to democracy? And his answer was, I see him on Wednesday. Yeah. I don't know. I mean, what do you think?
It's the first truthful thing he's said in three and a half years. Because they are meeting Wednesday. I would love to be a fly on the wall for that meeting, but I think it's going to be a pretty one-sided conversation. As far as Kamala Harris goes, that's the question that is the bubble gum for the mind today. She's become immediately inconsequential.
Yeah.
I mean, I've never seen an off switch hit this hard in my life. She concedes the election is over. Trump's at 312, and Kamala Harris might as well be on the moon. Nobody cares. Not even her sycophantic media cares. Nobody's asking any questions. Nobody's assuming she's going to go to MSNBC. I don't even know why they'd want her. She can't speak.
Okay.
No one's assuming she's going to get a professor's job at George Washington University or Stanford, because she doesn't know anything. So unless she's planning on applying for that fries job at McDonald's, I don't know what she's going to do besides have someone ghostwrite a book for her. And even then, who would want to read it?
Yeah, and could she go on a book tour? Could she go out and talk about the book and do interviews?
Oh, she could go out and talk about the book. No one's going to learn about the book. It's a book. It has pages. It has pages in a number that makes it a book. That's going to be it. And would you like to read a chapter? And people will go, please don't.
No kidding. Yeah, she did. Don't do the audiobook. We'll get a celebrity.
And I'm not too sure Willie Brown can buy enough copies to make it worth any big publishing houses a while to give her a multi-million-dollar contract for a book. So I guess that's why she kept her husband around. Yeah. because he can now be the breadwinner in the family, and she will get her pension from being vice president, which I really think, boy, if there was a case for applying the Lemon Law to politicians so that we could get our money back, this would be it.
Well, but, exactly. Yeah. Well, you said she'll get the pension, of course. I don't think she'll have the Kamala Harris library, but I don't think vice presidents have libraries, to be honest.
I don't think so either. And if she did, it could fit in a telephone booth, and I've just dated myself.
Well, exactly. Well, one of the things, even we've talked about James Carville before, and of course he was making these outlandish predictions. She was going to win. It was because Trump was nuts. All those his words, not mine. But he kind of brought it down in the last day or so, saying that her problem came down to this question on The View about how she would be different. And she basically said, I'm going to do more for home health care or something like that, where she really missed the opportunity because, again, she doesn't know she can't hit it out of the park, even if they tee it up for her.
It's coming from the anorexic Muppet. Every single thing that James Carville says you have to understand is coming out of the mouth for somebody who can take anything and spin it to mean anything else for a living.
Yep. Yep.
He once had a brief period in time when he helped elect Bill Clinton to office, but he has consistently been wrong ever since. So I don't know why anybody listens to this idiot anymore. He's a caustic, hateful human being. And the reason Kamala Harris lost is because she sucked as a candidate. She's a horrible politician. She's an even more horrible public servant. She's a self-centered, narcissistic waste of time. And 92% of her staff, while she was vice president, can tell you that. She's a caustic bully without an original thought in her skull. So that's why she lost, Jim. It's not because she had a bad time on The View. And if you're gleaning your political intelligence and you're trying to divine your political positions in life by watching The View, you've got your own set of problems.
No kidding.
But she lost because she was horrible. She's the worst candidate they've put up, even more so than Mike Dukakis. At least Mike Dukakis was a governor that actually ran for office and won election. Think about what Kamala Harris did. She pretty much got placed in San Francisco. And because she was placed with the money people in San Francisco, the same people backed her and placed her as in state office out there. Then she was appointed to the Senate. So what major election has she ever run on her merits with and won? None. Zero.
Yeah.
She's a hollow, cheap suit with an even hollower skull. So she lost because she sucked.
Well, and all this postmortem about her too. I mean, they can't kind of keep it going, especially like on MSNBC and so forth. But the idea, of course, now, Frank, is that we've seen some pretty significant shifts, especially in states like New York and even California, shifting towards the Republican, which is also insult to injury for Kamala's campaign, basically, and the Democrats in general. And of course, what I think people want to do is they want to go into this future that where we don't have an economy of opportunity or whatever she called it, but we're actually going to go into a future where people can actually do better, and especially if they break out of these molds of these preconceived notions and groupings by race and skin color or whatever, ethnicity, whatever you want to call it. And that's because some of these different commentators are literally going apoplectic, telling people how they voted wrong because of the color of their skin or whatever.
Here's a very valid question that everybody needs to ask. If these people are employed as commentators on opinion news programs, what gives them the right to tell you voted wrong? They don't have a right to tell you voted wrong. They don't even have a right to object to the way you voted. They can say they themselves don't like it, but they shouldn't be preaching to you about how you should vote in the first place. It's not their purview. That's why we keep calling them elitist garbage. And you know what? We castigated Joe Biden for calling the people garbage, but anybody who purposely sits down to plan and plot about how to manipulate the way you think to get their way, I'm going to put in the category of garbage.
Mm-hmm.
So right now, people like CNN and MSNBC and the alphabet networks, NPR, everybody who was shilling for the left, transparently shilling for the left, is scrambling to try to maintain relevance. Because if anything was taught to us this election, mainstream media doesn't count anymore.
Yeah.
Kamala Harris spent $1 billion on this campaign, 20 million in the hole.
In the hole, exactly.
Yeah. So that's $1 billion point two on this campaign to buy ads, to make sure that the media was on her side, et cetera, et cetera. And she got crushed. So the day of the mainstream media and the quote unquote news media having the influence over how elections are outcomes are, they're over. Social media and alternative media have changed that, and the mainstream media killed themselves.
You know, there is so much going on, no doubt about it. But of course, with President Trump, he's been talking to all these different world leaders. I think you've got a lot of them trying to anticipate, what life is going to be like, here in a couple of months when Joe Biden finally leaves office, taking Kamala Harris with him, of course. But for example, even over in Qatar, looks like they're not wanting to deal with Hamas anymore there. So there can be some pretty big changes on the world stage, especially where what's happening in Israel is concerned right now, not to mention Ukraine as well.
Yeah, I think you're going to see Hamas want to actually engage in some more genuine ceasefire deals with the Israelis. As a matter of fact, I believe there's one report that said they want to bring the war to an end now. So, let's bring the war to the end now. I think we've made our point. Let's bring the war to the end now. This is if the people who said, and Victor Davis Hanson is one of them. Ironically, Rod Blagojevich on Tucker Carlson's show is another one. The people who said that this election was going to be a replay of 1980, they hit it right on the head, right down to the fact that the people who have been shooting their mouths off and doing nefarious things around the world, especially in the Middle East, looked at who's coming into office and they're saying, let's wind this silliness down. Yeah. Because the guy's coming to office.
Well, and the hostages came home the day Reagan took the oath of office, basically. He made that announcement shortly after doing that. And they just knew that there was a new sheriff in town.
Yeah, the mullahs literally released him while he was standing giving his inauguration speech.
Yep.
That's how terrified they were of Reagan. And I think we're seeing shades of that again. The mullahs went through this once. They did. Let's wrap this up right now, because they know how to play a long game. They figure, okay, we know we've got him for 4 years. We don't know what's going to come after that. We've done the damage we want to do during a time when we had someone who was spineless and milquetoast in the Oval Office, inept and incompetent in every way when it comes to dealing with foreign relations. And okay, now we've got to go dormant again for a little while. They'll keep issuing rhetoric every Friday during prayers, screaming death to America and death to Israel. But I don't think they're going to be doing a lot of the things that they did. I could be wrong. I'm not a prognosticator. They may think it's their time, which would be a major mistake, because I think, when we're looking at somebody like Iran and the mullahs and the chief sponsor of terrorism around the world, shooting their mouths off and then saying that we've got nuclear capability, with the world making this big pivot back to sanity, the response to anything that they do that would be over the top would be monumental, and I think they know that.
Exactly. Well, Yeah, and it's going to be a very, very different world. And also, too, in terms, just briefly, with 1980, there were some pretty clear choices. I think it's very different today in terms of the magnitude of those choices. But Reagan versus Carter, not totally dissimilar to Trump versus Harris, but Jimmy Carter's a very different Democrat, let's say, than Kamala Harris would ever be. But the clear choices was there, and people wanted to have something that they figured was going to actually elicit real change and not just more of the same lies. We're fighting for you, blah, blah, blah.
Well, they were tired of being lectured to. If you remember the Carter years, and again, we're dating ourselves here, Kyle. Yeah. But if you remember the Carter years, we were getting lectured down to the point of, this is where you should have your thermostat in your home. If you're cold, put on a sweater. I remember that. That was like, are you kidding me? We live in the United States of America.
Yeah. And Carter had that cardigan sweater or something he would wear. Yeah.
Yeah. So, we had this constant lecturing again back then that reemerged. And this is what happens when the arrogance of the left feels free to exert itself. We thought there was going to be a historic change. At least many Americans did. I did not, but many Americans thought there was going to be a historic change with Obama. And, okay, well, we chalked one in the column for history with the first half-black president, I guess. But it almost immediately went back to this arrogant, elitist, snobbish, talk down your nose to people kind of attitude where you're not doing it right, you're thinking wrong, you have to think this way, and we're going to do it this way whether you like it or not. And we're just going to do it and then ask for forgiveness later if it transgresses the Constitution. We're right back to that with Biden on steroids.
Absolutely. And then blame the Supreme Court and say it's gone rogue if they say we have overstepped the Constitution.
Yeah, and then we have to change that because we can never be wrong. We can never be wrong. This is, and I say that a little bit in jest, but it's at the core of what progressives believe, going all the way back to Wilson. He was the guy that said, you know what? Because he came from academia. He was the president of Princeton. He came from academia. He was the one that said, you know what? Yeah, elected representatives are fine, but they're not the experts in their field. So I'm going to load the federal government up, all the departments and all the agencies, my cabinet and everything else, with quote unquote academic experts. They know better how to do this than the person you send to Washington to vote on your behalf. And that's where we got away from this. Mm-hmm. And the arrogance was brewed. It was brewed out of that sentiment to the point where today, if you are a full-fledged progressives, you look down your nose at people. That's why Hillary Clinton's not likable. She really doesn't like the people. Barack Obama doesn't really like the people. He finds the people to be a nuisance. You should just do what I say because I'm more intelligent than you. Yeah. Well, the people just raised a giant middle finger to that kind of thinking. And I hope they maintain that posture of standing there with their middle finger up to the progressive movement, because the progressives have done more damage to the Constitution and more damage to our country than any other political ideology we've ever had in the United States.
Yeah. Yeah. They have kind of this modern day, the peasants are revolting attitude. Peasants are, yes, they are, that kind of thing. Yeah.
And that circles all the way back to what we were saying in the first segment. We were talking about the media. The media have a seat at this progressive table of arrogance now, and that's why you're being told you didn't vote right.
Yeah. And somebody got paid $1 million to try to tell you how to vote. That was Oprah.
Well, yeah, Oprah's she's got one of the wider tables seats at the table, to be able to espouse her garbage, and I'm sure she'll just go lick her wounds in her multi-million-dollar compound in Maui. And I can tell you right now that the people of Maui do not appreciate all of these megalomaniacs moving there and building these giant estates because it's ruining their way of life.
Yep.
They are elitizing Maui, and when some of the smaller villages on the island were quaint and quite wonderful and beautiful, left alone. Just like the mountains of Idaho and Colorado didn't used to be the way it is, but the infection from the coasts just keeps moving to beautiful places and ruining the politics there because the arrogance of the progressive movement and the elitists won't stop.
Yeah, exactly right. Exactly right. Well, Frank Salvato, undergroundusa.com is the website. Nullification is the book. And Frank, you have a great rest of your morning. And we're going to talk to you this week again on Wednesday. So take care.
You're listening to Underground USA.
Our First Amendment right, free speech, is under attack by woke activists and politicians. Wokeism seeks to suppress opinions and ideas that are deemed offensive, insensitive, or problematic, thereby stifling the free exchange of ideas and the pursuit of truth. It emphasizes social justice, identity politics, political correctness, and the regulation of language, and relies on euphemisms and ambiguous language to create the illusion of consensus, thus avoiding confrontation with opposing viewpoints. Wokeism is antithetical to free speech because it stifles the free exchange of ideas and the pursuit of truth. This is in direct opposition to the principles of free speech. Wokeism is an ideological cancer shopped by those who want to control you. This November, we have an opportunity to render wokeness to the ash heap of history. Vote smart. Vote against wokeness and those who would use it to control you.
And, we have to stay woke. Like, everybody needs to be woke. And you can talk about if you're the wokest or woker, but just stay more woke than less woke.
If you like the podcast, please head on over to undergroundusa.com and sign up for the Substack. It brings new podcasts and articles directly into your email box, circumventing the censors and the gatekeepers of social media and the mainstream media complex. And please remember the people who lost everything in western North Carolina, eastern Tennessee, and northern Georgia. Just because the mainstream media complex has moved on to figure out a way to obstruct the Trump mandate doesn't mean those people still don't need our help. And as the holidays approach, be sure to talk politics, religion, and current events with your family, friends, colleagues, and acquaintances. Be polite, use facts, and refrain from being caustic. Because when we talk to each other, we realize we have more in common than in difference. And that's how we circumvent the balkanization of the United States by the deep state who want to control us. You're listening to Underground USA. No fear, no political correctness, and no wokeism. My name is Frank Salvato. Happy Veterans Day.